If you're a fan of Junji Ito or just any horror-adjacent mangaka in recent memory, then you should be thanking the god of horror manga himself, Kazuo Umezu. He may dress like Waldo and live in a candy cane house, but I assure you he's responsible for creating some of the bleakest horror manga in history like Drifting Classroom and Baptism. He had a pretty extensive career dating all the way back to the 50s, starting at the early age of 18 on shoujo manga. Through that, he would synthesize a form of horror that would combine beauty and horror in a way that broke all the norms. He rose to fame quickly in the 60s and 70s as the demand for horror manga skyrocketed, but in the 90s, he would face one of his biggest challenges with his new manga, 14. This is a massive 260-chapter manga containing over 4,000 pages of densely detailed artwork that features his most surreal and feverish nightmares. The project would prove to be a relentless 5-year period until the man himself couldn't physically bear it anymore. Kazuo Umezu might be best known for his horror, but he's also dabbled in a bit of science fiction and comedy. You never really know what you're walking into when you read his manga. He flipped the script so many times that you wonder how he'll do it again, and in 14, all the scripts are flipped. It's like a weird hodgepodge of everything he's worked onto up at this point. On top of that, he also doesn't write like his usual self. Typically, there are surreal parts to his stories, but here he reportedly took directly from dream journals and other loose ideas. Everything that you know about logical storytelling is tossed out the window for the sake of pure absurdism. So what you're left with is Umezu at his most unhinged and unfiltered, which sounds really great, but also, what the fuck was wrong with this man? Case in point, the story begins with the birth of a chicken. Not just any chicken, a biological mutant chicken that wreaks havoc on humanity for its ill treatment of the planet by the name of Chicken George. He also has a sidekick in the form of a regular chicken that can talk named Lucy, a side chick if you will. The basic premise is so outlandish that it's not meant to be taken completely seriously, but I didn't really grasp that up to a certain point because it's sort of played straight, and that's not even the craziest thing that happens. This is something that you have to accept if you really want to enjoy this manga. The first arc, I would say, would be a bit of a litmus test for how much of the insanity that you can handle, because by the end of the story, you're gonna hit a wall and see things like alien invasions and flying dinosaur ships without even batting an eye. The follow-up after Chicken George rebels against his creators involves a sweeping political narrative that culminates into an oncoming apocalypse. So on the surface, 14 might seem like a completely nonsensical mess to the average reader, but Umezu is pulling a lot of his own personal philosophy and worldview into this, albeit with the subtlety of a brick. Since Umezu started working on horror manga, he's always made a point of having sympathy for the outsiders or monsters, because the actual monsters are sometimes the humans. A beast or a creature might not have the ability to reason or make moral judgments, but humans have the ability to do that and choose to act cruelly regardless. After bleak revelations are revealed to the world, the humans are quick to shed their mask and become their true, violent selves. The world of 14 is sick and overrun with corporate greed. Chickens are genetically modified without care, the environment is exploited, and there's even a new type of human created, literally called commodities. The mutant uprising that Chicken George incites and the death of the planet might be tragic, but ultimately a much needed cleaning of the slate. It's a little eerie seeing just how far ahead of the curb Umezu was with his politics, talking about global warming and other things that have sadly only become more accurate as time passes. Another part of 14 that has aged well is the lamenting over how utterly incompetent the global superpowers are. The human leaders of the world are constantly making impulsive decisions, which leads to an infinite amount of cover-ups that end up being completely pointless. Not a single reasonable decision is made regardless of the amount of power and brains that are behind it. This makes Chicken George look all the more effective as a force of change. The plot is incredibly hard to describe in simple terms because it's so unfiltered and disjointed. For all 260 chapters, it is unflinching in its depiction of Umezu's dreams that are overwrought with panic and massive leaps in logic. You can't really say that the writing quality is good, but I don't think that you could say the writing quality is bad either. Umezu is clearly not interested in telling a story that is logical or traditional in any form. For example, there are a lot of moments that are built up like the aliens attacking the Earth, but then they just quickly leave. In other manga, this would feel contrived, but a lot of dreams also feel contrived. People and things disappear as soon as they arrive, like that one dream where you're actually living a normal and healthy lifestyle before it shifts to like a monkey tearing it up on the dance floor or something. What, just me? I can't really blame 14 for it because I feel like Umezu did a terrific job in capturing that fever dream feeling. You have to respect his dedication to 14 and his willingness to try to reinvent the wheel after his lengthy career. It's a fascinating view inside of Umezu's warped mind for better or for worse. Umezu has always been very gifted with his grotesque imagery, and it's not an exception in 14. He has such a good understanding of how to make something look scary that it almost affects me on a primal level. I wouldn't say that this is Umezu's scariest work, but it definitely had some images that are permanently burned into my eyes. It's a very unique spin on sci-fi horror. The horror really isn't so much from the creatures or anything like that, but the existential threat that we pose to ourselves and having to face harsh realities of our own greed. People who aren't familiar with Umezu's work might look at his art and lump him in with cheap, shock value, gory horror, but that's not really the case. If anything, 14 will at least make you appreciate how versatile it is when it comes to horror. He's one of the best examples of the industry that can pull off physiological and psychological horror at the same time to perfection. I wouldn't recommend starting off with 14 for anybody trying to get into his work because there's a large amount of stuff happening here, and not everybody can handle 260 chapters of this stuff. Even as an Umezu fan myself, I found myself struggling with certain parts of the story and got burnt out. It's not really surprising that this ended up being his final manga work. I'm not sure how he managed to even cover the material he did with the grueling work hours. The man used to work up onto 5 serializations at one time back in the 60s and 70s on both shoujo and shonen magazines. On top of that, like many people in the industry, he was working around the clock, often 16 or 20 hours a day, trying to meet deadlines. Unfortunately, all of his hard work would catch up with him in the worst way possible. In 1995, Kazuo Umezu would start developing painful tendinitis that would force him to retire and end 14. It was actually so bad to the point where the inflammation made it so that he couldn't really hold his own pen. This wasn't the only thing that drove him to retirement, as there was also a wave of harsh criticism towards horror manga at that time. Publishers told him that scary manga wasn't possible anymore. I'm not really sure where they arrived to this conclusion, as his successor, Junji Ito, was starting to hit his stride and Hitoshi Iwaki's Parasite was running well up until 1995. Most importantly, he also felt a lack of recognition in the industry, effectively breaking his career as a mangaka. I can't really say that I thought the ending was satisfactory, but luckily, because of its nonsensical dream logic, it can get away with an abrupt ending. It wasn't all grim for him because he continued to experiment in creative areas like painting and even becoming a TV personality. He ended up winning the prize for inheritance at French Comic Festival, which encouraged him to make 101 paintings based on My Name is Shingo. While he did go on to accomplish much after his manga career, and went on to influence even bigger mangaka, 14 remains such an interesting footnote for his career, or really any career for any mangaka. But I think it's very fitting for his last manga to be his boldest creation. If anything, this is a lesson that the price of dedication is often a steep one.